Okay, so let's go now. The good news here is the two ships within a very little time frame were completely refurbished. But this is not the first time we do this. Now, La Pinta and Isabela II have been in the Galapagos, have been producing happy customers for many years. We do dry docks with certain frequency. In fact, we do it more often than we would have to do them in order to comply with the insurance companies. And the reason we do this is because Galapagos, as many of you know, has no seasons. You can go there any time of the year. The days are always 12 hours long. The nights are 12 hours long. So you can pick any moment to go to the Galapagos, and it's always going to be good weather and perfect viewing of wildlife. The wildlife is not limited to any seasonality either, because we are on the equator. So there's one group leaving and the next group is coming on the same flight. So it's an ongoing process. The ships don't get much rest at all. So evidently we try to make these docks also a little bit more often than we would have to do them. But there's also another thing, and that is this ship will be the home of your passengers, or if you come, it will be your home for the next 6 nights or 4 nights or 10 nights, whatever length you're staying. So giving them always something new, a fresh face, a facelift, is always something that our guests appreciate. So you never come to our vessels and get the idea that it feels worn, it feels tired. So the ships are constantly renewed, not just on the mechanical parts, but also on their hotel aspects, on everything that our guests experience, or even to the touch. So a little bit about our company. Some of you already know us for many years, I can see. Metropolitan Touring has been around since 1953. In 1969, once it was established that Galapagos was compatible with tourism after a study was made, and this compatibility was with small vessels, so small groups could go on shore with park wardens. We now call them naturalist guides. Then we put the first ship in the Galapagos Islands in 1969. When the US put a man in the moon, we put a ship in the Galapagos Islands. So we've been there before anybody else. So we're the oldest company, the first company in the Galapagos operating on vessels, and we have done that nonstop until now. And in the pandemic 2020, when everything did stop for a few months, our ship, La Pinta, was the first one to operate. And for about 3 months' time, it was the only ship operating, because we also kept the promise that if one cabin is sold, the ship will operate. And we never had just one cabin. Luckily, we were able to operate, but that was our promise then after the pandemic, when the pandemic cleared. And the same promise we made in 2001 after the September 11 events, when tourism also dropped. We said if one person shows up, the ship will operate. And we did operate Isabela II at one point with 2 guests, 26 crew members, a whole week. So a little bit more about Galapagos. I mentioned the first ship was our ship. That's Lina A over here. That's one of our first guides right there, Luis Maldonado. This is how presentations were made and back in the day. And now we have modern PowerPoint presentations. We have electronic microscopes that we can see on the screens. So we use the modern technology also for the presentations. We are expedition vessels. That's what we do in Galapagos. So there's been a long way to go from Lina A, and in the meantime, we did try everything. We worked with small vessels. We had sailboats. We had single-hulled, double-hulled catamarans in Galapagos. We operated everything until we got to the point where we defined that what is the ideal operation in Galapagos? What's the ideal length of staying in the Galapagos? What's the ideal crew that we need to have, even though tourism has changed to some extent over the years. Now, we are in Colombia, we're in Peru, we're in Ecuador as a DMC, as locals. If you want to know the weather in Galapagos, we open the window. We're stationed in the Galapagos Islands. The same thing goes with Peru and Bolivia and Colombia. These are some of the companies that we've worked with, again, since 1969. You can imagine a very long time. Somebody operates Galapagos, chances are they're with us. And these are the affiliations that we are members of. We also have a couple of hotels. We have a hotel in Quito, in the heart of the city of Quito, is under the brand of Relais Chateau, is our hotel, Casa Gangotena. In the Galapagos Islands, we have the Finch Bay Hotel. We recently just did a few important refurbishings there too. And then we also have Mashpi Lodge, which is almost as young as Casa Gangotena. Also in Quito, but from Casa Gangotena, without leaving the city of Quito, you're driving 3 hours and then you get to Mashpi. And this is a great combination with the Galapagos Islands in almost every respect. This is a lush rainforest, 418 species of birds, and it's a borderline between rainforest and cloud forest. And here you have to find the things in this Baroque forest that surrounds you. Galapagos is more barren. You have to be careful not to step on the iguana. So it's a perfect compatibility. So these are the ships that we have in Galapagos: Isabela II, La Pinta, and Sea Lion, that operates on day tour basis. And all of these have been just recently renewed and refurbished. So let's go there. First of all, Galapagos. I know many of you know the Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos Islands is that group of dots right in front of Ecuador, straddled on the equator. Being on the equator, as I mentioned earlier, means that you can come any time of the year. The weather is always good. There's a couple of weather seasons, but there is no reduction of the length of the day, which means that for the wildlife, both in Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, and the Galapagos Islands, it's not a time of the year that you should come and see certain animals, because if you miss that window, you will simply not see them. That doesn't happen here. As you can see here, also, I put as an example Chicago. From Chicago to Ecuador is just a very swift trip. Although we don't have direct flights from many of the cities from the US, you can see that there's just one stop in the US, and then you get to Galapagos or to Ecuador, or a stop in one of the nearby hubs. So getting here is very easy. It's almost the same time zone if you are from the US, and I saw many of you were greeting from the States or from Canada. It's virtually the same time zone, so you don't have a jet lag to worry about it. And then there's a few more things about Ecuador that perhaps you don't know. It's one of the smallest countries in South America. It has a few things that you might be looking for in South America. They're right here. Because of being on the equator, we don't have a summer savings time. And our currency is the US dollar now for about 25 years. You come here and you pay with US dollars, and your change is US dollars. So that makes things very easy when you don't have to be mentally doing conversions or anything. Same thing with Galapagos, by the way. And you know how much you're tipping, you know how much you're paying, how much if something is expensive or not expensive, and if any cash is left to you, if you're going back to the US, if that's where your clients come from, well, you can spend it there. You don't need a visa to come here. You don't need vaccinations to get here. It's a democratic country, and because of the dollar, the economy has been very much stable in the last 25 years. So all of this makes the country fairly attractive. You need a passport, at least 6 months of validity to get here, and nothing else. Ecuador is divided in a couple of regions. We have the coast, it's one of the Pacific coasts of South America, but it's one of the 7 Andean countries. The longest and second highest mountain range on Earth goes right through Ecuador. And on the right end of Ecuador, the darker part on my map, that's the Amazon. It's one of the 5 Amazonian countries. So pretty much what you may be looking for in South America, chances are you can find it right here on a single stop in Ecuador. So you have to go through Ecuador to the Galapagos Islands because of its fragility. There's no way you can fly directly into the Galapagos Islands. You have to fly to Ecuador. Quito is a perfect headquarter while you're coming to, if you want to go to Galapagos, because the flights to the Galapagos Islands leave very early in the morning. It's a good idea to come here and allow at least 1 full day in Quito, and there's tons of things that you can do here if you like nature, if you like culture, if you like food, if you like astronomy or shopping, if you want to do fun things or more adventurous things. There's a lot of things you can do right out of Quito year-round, and then leave to the Galapagos Islands 1 extra day later. This is good. So you come to Galapagos, you're not completely tired. As I said, the flights leave very early in the morning to Galapagos. This is a 1,300 kilometer flight. That's like going from New York to Chicago, if you're familiar with the US distances, or from Rome to Madrid, if you're from Europe. So it's about a 2-hour flight. You go one time zone back. So it's 1 times minus as you go westbound. The other reason why it's good to spend an extra day in Ecuador is because sometimes when the flights arrive in the evening, your luggage might not be there, or your client's luggage might not be there. And then if they leave early in the morning, you can imagine they will not be very happy if now the luggage will be trailing them, but they're already on board of the ship and they're wearing whatever they have upon arrival in Ecuador. So it's a good idea to have that buffer day there. Now, Ecuador, as I mentioned, has a lot of things to offer before you go, before and or after a Galapagos trip. So people, once they learn that Ecuador is one of the most diverse places on Earth, it's one of the 17 mega diverse countries, and it's on the top 5 when you go to birds, vascular plants, reptiles, mammals, and invertebrates. So it's an extraordinarily rich country, and it's a very small country. So it's one of the richest places on Earth when you compare it to its size. Now, question about mass tourism and how many people go to the Galapagos Islands. I know this is in the media a lot, and I just want to put this in perspective. I've been in Galapagos since the 80s, and I've seen how the numbers increase, yes, but what is important to know, and that would be on the next slide, is that Galapagos is a fraction of Galapagos is where people live, and the rest of Galapagos is a national park. To go into the national park, you have to go by boat. So here you can see whatever is dark is a national park, and the lighter areas in the 5 islands that are also circled here, that's where people live. To go there, you can go by a plane to Galapagos, you stay in the hotels, and you're inside the rural areas, but you're not inside the national park. To get into the national park, you have to go by boat. There's many options, we'll talk about that. And as you can see, the total numbers, the green line has been on the rise. The highest we had was about 330,000 people, which also in perspective, if you think 330,000 people in 1 year on an area that is equivalent to the size of the state of Mississippi, half the UK, it's huge. Galapagos is enormous. 330,000 people in 1 year. It's not a big number, but from that number, the blue line indicates how many people stayed in a hotel. They did not go into the national park. They flew to Galapagos and stayed on the towns. The red line, that's how many people went by boat. And what you have to understand is that since the year 2000, when we switched to the US dollar, as I mentioned earlier, Galapagos became expensive for everyone. Until then, because our local currency was in such bad shape, you didn't feel how expensive Galapagos was because the US dollar in relationship to the local currency was a very powerful coin. So it wasn't expensive if it came with dollars or with Deutsche Mark or with British pounds. But when we switched, Galapagos became expensive for everyone. So people stopped going on ships and they stayed in hotels. Now, 1 out of 4 people traveling these days goes by boat, and 3 out of 4 stay in hotels. But 1 out of 4 goes into the national park. So 94,000 people inside a national park, and the national park, as you can see here, is 97% of the land surface of Galapagos, and the land surface of Galapagos is enormous. The other thing you need to know is that when you're coming on a ship, you will not be going on ports of call. You will be going, the ports of call, if you want to call them that way, is a place where nobody lives. You will be welcomed by marine iguanas and sea lions and blue-footed boobies, not by port authorities, buses, guides, and souvenir shops. The only 5 ports of call that was on the previous map are on the towns in Galapagos and Baltra, which is a military base. This picture on the lower right, on the lower side of the slide, is Puerto Ayora. That's the largest port of call. By law, Galapagos boats are not allowed to moor on docks, so you have to anchor and you go on shore by dinghies. That's to avoid transferring species from one island to the other. So you can see this is a busy day in Galapagos. On the lower slide, the upper slide is any other place. I don't want to mention names, but you can see you will not see ports of call. Different from other ships, these are expeditions in Galapagos. So you go on shore and you'll be seeing wildlife. What do most people do nowadays? Unfortunately, they stay on the towns. There's fun towns. There's great restaurants, great bars, great discos. You will see sea lions and blue-footed boobies. Yes, you'll see them on the fisherman's dock, as you can see right there. And some of them do it, they go from one populated island to the other. And for that, they do these fast boats. And that could be a 2 to 3 hour ride, a very bumpy and a very uncomfortable ride. Notice also they're not wearing life jackets. So, it's questionable in the safety that you're going from one town to the other on these speedboats. And then you go in a town, and the wildlife you'll be seeing is on like the lower picture there. I think Galapagos is this. You're going on a comfortable place where you can sleep at ease. You have good food. In the morning, you wake up, you're on a different side. You go on shore with a small group that speaks your language, with a guide that will be explaining what is happening in around you. And you will see practically nobody else, because our boats, they have 3 or 4 groups, will barely ever meet another boat and share the site. But then again, you will not see crowds here. Any of these pictures could also be from December, the busiest month of the year, because you will not have more than the boats that are allowed to be on that morning or that afternoon on any of the visiting sites. Here's another thing about Galapagos. Every year, if you're going back, you can see it's always on the list of the best places to travel, the best places to go by boat, the best places to see wildlife, the best aquatic experiences. Galapagos is always one of the top destinations. So perhaps now you're surprised that you do not have large numbers of people going to the Galapagos Islands. 90,000 people is about how many people you have in Venice. New York Times put it on the top places to go as the second place, the first one for Latin America. As you can see, there's a few others that put it on the top lists. Now, let's go with our boats and see what happened, what has been renewed. La Pinta is a ship that came in once we noticed that single guided vessels, we used to operate for years and years. I was a guide on those boats. Single guided vessels had a couple of issues that we thought were important. Some of them had to do with safety. That, of course, is something that you cannot postpone or shouldn't postpone. And some others were simply of convenience and comfort and things. So La Pinta is basically the result of fusing 3 permits of 16 passenger boats into one of 48. But instead of having 3 guides, we noticed that we can go up and we have 4 guides on board, one being the expedition leader. In our ships, the expedition leader is the next after the captain. So we have the captain on the top of the hierarchy, and then we have the cruise director, expedition leader, first mate, and chief engineer. They're on the same level of hierarchy, because we believe you go to Galapagos because of expeditions. And this is a ship that brings together everything that we've dreamt for decades in Galapagos. What is the expedition leader's dream vessel? What's the hotel manager's dream vessel? What is our passengers' dream vessels? Captains, what sort of gadgets would you like to have? You know, engineers, what kind of engines would you like to have? What kind of desalination systems you would like to have? And this ship came as a result of that collection of dream lists that we put together into one boat of 48 passengers, 24 cabins. You can see the images on the left. That's what the ship looked like for a while. And then we changed it to the right. So you can see It's constantly being freshened up. These are dining area and lounge, how the cabins changed. Again, this is a constant process. We do it a lot often than we need to do, but we want to provide a fresher, good-looking vessel. And you come in, this will be your home. This will be your apartment for the next 6 nights or 4 nights or 10 nights, whatever the length you're staying there. So you can see also the external areas are constantly on a renewal area. We change the furniture, we change the seats, we change everything, because this is a ship that is providing your home in the Galapagos Islands. Here's Isabela II. Isabela II came on also on a dry dock a little bit before La Pinta, and you can see some of these places we put in. For instance, the jacuzzi. We learned over the years that a swimming pool on a ship is not, a life changer. Jacuzzi is, especially because for about 7 months of the year, Galapagos is a little bit cooler than you would expect being right on the equator. That's why we have penguins in Galapagos. So after snorkeling, we provide wetsuits. After snorkeling, you come back, you shower, and you get into a hot tub. And there's a little bar next door, so you can have a drink and you're enjoying the hot tub, or simply enjoying at the sun. So everything has been changed here, including the furniture, as you can see right there. So I'm going from top to bottom. You can see the rooms changes were important, from wallpaper, the carpets, the bathrooms, everything went there. This is what the rooms look like, what they look now. This is what the suite looked like. This is what the suite looks now. So you can see the dining area now. There's been important changes, the library now. We've also increased the speed of our Wi-Fi. So we're right now on this testing stage, and we can see that the Wi-Fi is going a lot faster. So this is great. We haven't really talked much about this, because we'll see how it works with the new internet provider. This was the area that we use a lot. This is the bar, but also where we have the presentations and lectures and so on. And there you can see it's looking different. So we put the same type of shades as we have in the dining area. See the microscope in the back. That's an electronic microscope connected to the screen. So the guides can come in here and have presentations of something exciting we're looking at. The bar tends to be the heart of a vessel. I guess that's self-explanatory. That's to change completely, including some of the drinks that we had there, and we are bringing up also some new signature drinks for the bar. This is the area where we meet to leave the vessel. Even there we decide to make it a little bit nicer. This is where you step out. This is at sea level. And from here, we step out directly onto the zodiacs. This is one of the things that was on our wish list, is to have an access at sea level, not on a higher level or only on the aft area, because this is the best way in the mornings or in the afternoons when we leave, we go through this area, because within a couple of steps, we're already on the zodiac heading out for our visit. And whether this is something that was not scheduled, for instance, we had a pot of whales on last 2 weeks ago. So we slowed down the vessel, we lowered down the zodiacs were on the sides. All of the guests decided to put the life jackets on, sunscreen, binoculars, and get out with the cameras, because looking at a group of orcas is always something exciting. And we have 23 species of cetaceans in Galapagos. So this is something that we do very often. If in the middle of the daytime sail we have whales, we lower the zodiacs and we try to show them to you. Or we're getting off on shore, look at the zodiacs. There's plenty of zodiacs on board. Nobody has to wait for one group to be delivered on land, so the zodiac comes back and collects the next group. We have 4 zodiacs for 4 groups. That's not a problem on both vessels. These are not Zodiac, the brand Zodiac, they're actually Pumar from Chile. Same size, same concept, 7 independent air chambers, an absolutely safe and efficient craft. We've been using these for decades and decades. We're so happy. We keep renewing these too, by the way. Now, here's a special thing I want to show you in the background. Look at Isabela II, freshly also with the anti-foul painting, so she's a little bit faster now because nothing can attach on the hull. And you can see on the top of the vessel, that's our glass bottom boat, and we have 8 single zodiacs, kayaks, sorry, and 8 double kayaks and 1 single kayak, and that's the maximum amount, the maximum number of kayaks allowed by the national park. So we can go to that level. Most of the ships, the small ships, do not have space to stow so many kayaks. So if all 16 passengers want to go kayaking, chances are, there's not enough kayaks. So you can kayak today, but allow somebody else to kayak tomorrow. This is something that has been gaining a lot of popularity for young and old. Everybody enjoys kayaking. So having space for 16 kayakers and a guide, and then have several shifts during that day because we have several guides, allows everyone to be able to enjoy these facilities. And the large glass bottom boat you see up there on the top of the Isabela II is a heavy craft. If it wasn't heavy, it would be bobbing on the surface and you wouldn't see anything but bubbles. So, and it has to have also structure on top of it. You'll see a picture later, so that you can actually use it as a glass bottom boat. That's the reason why there's practically no glass bottom boats in the Galapagos Islands. It has to be large and heavy, otherwise it wouldn't work. And it has to have a railing, it has to have a canopy, it has a glass, of course. And you have to have enough guides so that while somebody's using the glass bottom boat, somebody else is still allowed to go with a guide kayaking, and somebody else can go with a guide snorkeling. That's why we believe 3 guides minimum. When you go into the Galapagos on shore, you have dry landings, we have wet landings. The dry landings, generally there's a jetty somewhere, and there's more wet landings than dry landings, which is basically we strand the Zodiac there on the beach, and then we step into the water, we walk up a little bit, we provide special towels for this that you can dry up your feet before you put your footwear on. Some trails are a little bit more demanding than others. Galapagos is a volcanic archipelago. This is, for instance, Pahoehoe lava on the island of Isabela, and there you can see you need good walking shoes for this, unless you've done this before and you're happy with Tivas. But you can see a small group, one language, going with a guide on the designated areas, walking over Pahoehoe lava. If you don't bring you good footwear. This is on Santiago Island. This is a very, very young lava flow, Pahoehoe lava as well. Some of the trails are very easy. For instance, on this is the Olivine beach of Floriana. You can go with tevas. And even those that you see barefoot there, I'm sure they have tevas because there's a little part with fine gravel, but it becomes obnoxious after a while. But it's very easy and very short, right? The trails, some of them on the highlands, they could be muddy certain time of the year more than others. And the places we go do provide Wellingtons or rubber boots. You don't need to have your clients bring these boots, we provide them. And that's the place where we see the giant tortoises. So it's definitely worth going to the lush highlands to see the name giver of Galapagos. You see the children there in our vessels. We have a minimum age is 6 years and up. Children less than 6 years, contact your destination expert, and we will see if something can be done. If it's less than 4, then that would be even more complicated. And these are because of nautical regulations. But we have great experience with children 6 and up. In fact, we have activities for them on land and we have activities for them ashore. And if 2 families come in that they didn't know each other on vessels like Isabela and La Pinta, chances are that there is another family, especially if you're coming on the summer break or on the Christmas break. And then we will have one group of families, so that if somebody wants to avoid children, it's still the same best boats to come would be Isabela or La Pinta, because then you don't have to be on the group where the children are. You can be on a group with only adults. So it seems like contradictory, but this is the great vessel for families with kids, and this is a great vessel with couples or individuals that want to avoid kids. Going snorkeling in Galapagos, we provide the entire equipment. That includes the mesh bags, the towels, the special towels for salt water, the tubes, the masks. We have several types of masks because there's different types of faces. We also have snorkeling vests. Some people like to do it. These aren't life vests. These are snorkeling vests, so you can blow a little bit of air depending on how much you want to put in, and that gives you a little bit more buoyancy. And we also have wetsuits. These Galapagos is not terribly cold, but cold enough that there you can see some penguins. But the wetsuits, they're 2mm shorties, so they're very forgiving. If it's not exactly your size, It's somewhere in between. These accommodate a lot of more variations of bodies. But as long as your torso is in that 2 mm protection, you can feel a huge difference that you can stay longer when you're snorkeling in the Galapagos. But some people snorkeling, yeah, I want to do something more active. So we have the kayaks. By the way, we also replaced, you can see these are brand new ones too. The sea kayaks, these are sit on top kayaks. There's no skirt. You don't need to practice the Eskimo turn or anything like that. We do give you a safety briefing for the safety of travelers, the people who use the kayaks, but also for the safety of the Galapagos wildlife, because there's some rules on how you can behave when you're kayaking, and you have to have always a guide with you. But kayaking in Galapagos has become very, very, very popular. There's even another thing called the stand-up paddle boards that you can see here. I tried once and I couldn't do it, but I'm gonna try it again sometime soon. And here's a glass bottom boat. How do you get on the glass bottom boat? You use one of the Zodiacs to do something we call the mid-ocean transfer, or MOT, and then you get from the Zodiac directly onto the glass bottom boat. You do your turn of the glass bottom boat. See how heavy this boat is, so that you don't see any bubbles on the glass. You can see the bottom of the ocean there. So we have these glass bottom boats, very comfortable. It has a canopy on top. There's a boat driver, of course, and a guide. He's the one who took the picture that you're looking at. So this makes a huge difference. And then in some cases, you just want to stay in the beach. You have to have a guide with you. So that's when it makes sense that less than 3 guides, you have to give up on some of the options. That's why we never want to go back to boats with less than 3 guides. One being the expedition leader. That's with Isabela II and La Pinta. This is when you're done with the walks, you come back on board. On board, we use the restrooms. There's no restrooms on the islands. And then we meet in the lounge. This is Isabela II. And here we have presentations. We have all the equipment. And there's a lecture about something. It could be geology. It could be about Charles Darwin. It could be about marine mammals, or it could be something, volcanology, right? And then we also have meals there, of course. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast and lunch tend to be more on the buffet, and dinner on the served directly to the table. And there's a little screen there you see on the right, on the left picture, and that is during your meal. Now we will show you the menu for the next meal. That way you can choose what you would like to have on the next meal. That's a little bit awkward because you're eating something, but we're asking you about your next meal. The reason we do this is because that way we do not have to take out from the freezing stage too much fish or too much fowl or too much beef or too much pork, whatever we're cooking. So we have an idea of how many people would prefer one or the other option. We have 5 chefs on board just for passengers. We have chefs for the crew, separate chefs. So we can cater practically all of the dietary requirements we can get. Where we have difficulties would be with halal or with kosher. Kosher is possible. If you have clients who ask kosher, let us know, and we will let you know why it's possible, but it's not the ideal scenario, because the kosher has to be provided by somebody else in mainland, and it has to be flown into Galapagos, and then we provide it on each of the meals. It's possible, but it has limitations. Other than that, if they're vegan, if they're gluten-free, if they're vegetarian, if somebody has a birthday or a special request, we can accommodate all these things. So we eat inside and or outside, but we don't have a meal inside and another meal outside because it's still a small vessel. This is the area where most people would have access to our staff. Expedition leader and cruise director. This is the symbiotic team that we have, because these are the people you would have most contact with. Our ships also have a medical doctor, which most of the Galapagos ships don't have. 60 ships in Galapagos don't have a doctor. 9 have a medical doctor on board. Our ships always have a doctor, because we believe, you could have an allergy you didn't know, you could have an emergency, some pain could be the indication of something else. Only a doctor could figure this out. So having a doctor and a well-equipped infirmary is, for us, a very important thing. And this is the lounge of La Pinta. Here's the rooms of La Pinta. We can see they're very spacious. We wouldn't call this luxury necessarily. We don't have a Rembrandt behind your pillow. We don't have, mini bar and a balcony, because on our ships you will spend not so much time We have activities before breakfast. We have activities after dinner. You go on shore right after breakfast. You come back. You use the restroom in your cabin. Then you all head out again for snorkeling, kayaking, paddleboarding, that's for a boat. You come back on board. You go to your cabin. You shower. You change clothes. You have lunch, which is not in your cabin. After lunch, you may have a siesta. Yes, in your cabin. Probably not in your balcony. Why would you do that there? Probably in your bed. So we noticed that in the afternoon, it's the same thing as in the morning, but reversed. You hardly ever have time to enjoy something like a walk-in closet or a balcony, which is why we never want to go back to balconies again. We had them until 2015. We believe they were over-advertised, overpriced, and underused. But we do have connecting rooms, for instance. That is something families will appreciate. Now, if I can be very quick on this, and if I could sum up a little bit about what I talked about. I showed you how the ships have been going through a constant renewal, and one just weeks and the other one just months ago. If you go to Galapagos, there's 5 ways you could do it. There's 2 hotel options, and there's 3 ship options you can have. The 2 hotel options is, one is a hotel in a town. You go there and you have your night and your breakfast included. You have discos, bars, all sorts of things probably in the vicinity. You know, if you're going to Galapagos as an extension of a cruise, that might be a fun thing to do. But if you want to go to Galapagos and see Galapagos on a hotel base, then maybe you want to stick to expedition hotels. Make sure your hotel is an expedition hotel. There aren't many. What makes a hotel an expedition hotel? Well, does it have a yacht for day tours to take you into the national park? So the sea lions you'll see will not be at the Fisherman's Wharf, but on their colony, on their native islands, right? So that makes sense with the hotels. With ships, we believe there's 3 types of hotels. This is how we, ships or yachts. You have the expedition yachts with the minimum 3 guides that we talked in the previous slides. Then you also have recreational cruises. There's some large ships that come here where the ship is very important. You have a butler at the end of the corridor. You can sign up for glamping. One of the nights, there's a tempranillo that was extra, especially brought for meals because it matches the lobster tails from Galapagos. So that, it seems like the ship and its food and beverages is probably more important than the wildlife. Their itineraries are there. You go on shore, you see the wildlife. They're not crafted because of the wildlife, and that's perfectly fine. But if you want to go for wildlife, stay on an expedition yacht. And then what I told you earlier that we don't do anymore, which is the single guided yachts. Single guided yachts, there's one activity done, whatever the guide is doing at that moment. I had to speak in German and in English when I was a guide on these type of vessels. I had to explain everything twice. There was a question, I had to explain the question, answer the question, then translate the question and the answer. And there's only one activity that can be done if we do the hike. Some people want to walk slower or spend more quiet time photographing and recording the wildlife. And some want to do the walks a little bit swifter and have more time for snorkeling. There's different interests, abilities, limitations, but there's only one guide, so it has to all fit into one group. Languages, restrictions, abilities, and so on. So single guided yachts, we don't want to do that anymore. Also, because they were smaller, they're not manned by a captain, they're manned by a skipper. You have the skipper, the guide, the chef, the able seaman, or 2 able seamen, and the engineer, and that's it. So they also take turns at night steering the vessel, and we believe it's better if you have a ship where the captain, the first mate, the second mate are the ones that run the nautical part of the vessel. You have a first engineer and the second engineer, you have a cruise director, you have a medical officer. So with a single guided yacht, considering Galapagos is expensive, there was no way that you could include all of that staff, or having a vessel that's large enough to negotiate the swells, especially in the northern summer months when in Galapagos you get the southern trade winds. And that means that at night it could be a little bit choppy. You could have a little bit of rolling, especially in pitching. And if the boat is too small, guests have difficulty sleeping. With our vessels, it's a lot smoother, right? Here's when you have a single guided vessel. That's what happened. I did this for many years. And this is when you have 3 guides or more, minimum 3. Early in the morning we leave, we go on shore, but there's somebody for whom the trail is too difficult. Hey, there's a guide with you that will be doing the Zodiac ride, the Panga ride. You don't have to wait for everybody to come back and then do a little Panga ride. No, you can have your visit will be out of the comfort of the Zodiac. Once we're done, we come back on board, you use the restrooms. Then some will go out snorkeling. But what the people that cannot snorkel, they'll use the glass bottom boat. It's not active enough for me. I want to go kayaking. We have 3 guides, so we can have 1 guide with the snorkelers, 1 with the glass bottom boat, and 1 with the kayakers. Now, this is so good. Let's keep doing it. Yeah, let's keep doing it. We can stretch this a little bit further because now everybody can be doing something. We don't have to worry about some people waiting on the boat for the next activity. Now, one of the guides comes back on board as guests start returning to the ship because they're done with the morning, and prepares a lecture while the others are coming back with the clients. That's one of the important things about having 3 guides minimum. The other thing where I would say there's a big difference is the itineraries. The itineraries on our vessels were crafted by a team of guides. When you look at the wildlife in Galapagos, just like Africa has the big 5, Galapagos has the big 15, you can see that the distribution of Galapagos wildlife is sort of patchy. There's some animals that are found on virtually every spot in Galapagos. On every coastline, you find marine iguanas. Sea lions tend to be in most places. Blue-footed boobies, if they're not using it as a colony, they're using it as a foraging area. So you may see blue-footed boobies quite often. But see some others, like the penguins, like finding, where's Aldo? You'll see that penguins icon, there's only few places. They're on the west of Galapagos, definitely, but there's only 2 other places on the central and southern parts of Galapagos you may see penguins. The albatross is only found in 1 spot of 1 island. The Santa Fe land iguana is only found on Santa Fe. Red-footed boobies, they're only found in 2 spots. So our itineraries are made in such a way that we see the fur seals here, then we do a long sail at night to make sure that you get to see the red-footed boobies. Then we do a long sail at night, so we make sure that you see the Santa Fe land iguana, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, you can see there's a lot of sailing, right, in our vessels. Now, the reason we do this is because we want to make sure that at the end of your stay with us, you come home with enough trophies, enough big 15s. In the shortest itinerary that we don't do 3 nights anymore. It sells a lot. People appreciate buying it because of the price, but too many people thought it was too short. They had the feeling they could have spent 1 extra day. We don't get that with the 4-night itinerary. So our itineraries are 4 nights. There's 2 of 4 nights and 1 of 6 nights. That's what you can see on the bottom part of the slide. And on a 4-night itinerary, I can give you 12 big 15s. How do I do that? Well, after I'm done 1 day in 1 site, then we go a long distance during the night to get to the next place to make sure that in your shorter than 1 week stay in Galapagos, you get to see at least 80% of the big 15s. We believe Galapagos is a trip of a lifetime. Chances are you will not come back. You don't want to come back and feel like, hey, I missed a lot, for going on a 3-night itinerary, or hey, I spent 7 nights and I only have 9 big 15s. How is that possible, right? That's how Galapagos works, right? There's an example. You can see 12 on the shorter ones, and if you stay longer, of course, you can tick off all of them. Again, here is a ship like Isabela II. She's the smallest vessel that can still get the permission to have a heavy craft on top of it named the glass bottom boat. I gave you a couple of examples down there without mentioning names. You can see there's not much space where you can stow the kayaks. So guests that are happy to be able to do options, first you need to know that when you're going kayaking, you have to have a guide with you. So that means that the guide is with the kayakers. Nobody can go snorkeling, right? Or on a panga ride, right? But because we have at least 3 guides, we can have a guide with the kayakers, a guide with the snorkelers, and a guide with the glass bottom boat, right? Then it's a question of being right on the equator. yes, being on the equator, especially if there's a winter in the north, the trade winds do not reach Galapagos, so Galapagos is very calm. It's so calm that the albatross has to leave Hispaniola in February. The last ones leave sometime in January, and the first ones come back in March. And February, there are no albatrosses in Hispaniola because the ocean is so calm because there's no wind, and this heavy bird cannot take off. It's one of the only seasonal things we have in Galapagos. But for the rest of the year, you will have the trade winds. The trade winds move up to Galapagos, right on the equator in Galapagos. That's why we have penguins in Galapagos. So if the sea is a little bit choppy, especially at night, it would be very sad that you will not feel comfortable because it's moving like a little a walnut shell. Small ships have this issue. Then, of course, safety, having a medical doctor on board. We just saved somebody's life. This was a 16-passenger boat that radioed us and said, we have a client with chest pain. And of course, we welcomed that person. And what if we weren't there? I mean, we would never know. We have a whole process here with the medical doctor, the captain, and our staff in our office. When we have a medical emergency, we immediately assess the situation and we see what needs to be done. Whether the itinerary will have to be changed and the ship has to go back to the airport, which we've had cases of this, and we have immediate aerial evacuation. But in the meantime, the doctor on the airplane and the doctor on the ship are in constant communication to see what the situation is of the patient. And then it's flown to mainland Ecuador to a hospital where, of course, everything can be done from there. Now, how many ships have this ability? This is something, it's like a life insurance. It's good to have it and not need it, but it would be sad to need it and not to have it. And we're not huge vessels, but it's large enough that we can cater to individual interests. We have special meals for children. We have, as I mentioned, we can cater to different types of dietary restrictions. And we will remember that you, John, you like your martini shaken, not stirred. We know this right from the first day. Here's our itineraries of one of the vessels. You can see 4 nights, 5 days, 4 nights, 5 days, and 6 nights, 7 days. This is in all of our fleet, what we want to do. Less than a week because Galapagos is very expensive, but by making it shorter, we don't want to chop the most important part, which is the wildlife. So you can see there's a good distribution of Galapagos wildlife. When something exciting happens, there's a volcanic eruption or there's a group of whales in the vicinity, the captains immediately inform the expedition leader. And right away, we start seeing how we can adjust the itinerary to maximize your exposure of the Galapagos wildlife. Expedition is something that runs through our bloods since we started 1969, and that is something that is, you will notice on every single person of the ship. The people that you see and the people that you don't see, those that are in engines and the galley and so on. Here's a very brief video. I think I'm stretching my time a little bit. I started a bit earlier, sorry about that. This was an eruption that happened on Fernandina volcano. Of course, immediately our captains, our first mates, and our expedition leaders, they're looking at the charts and they see on the itinerary here, if instead of going this way, we go the other way, we will be able to pass that area at 3 in the morning. Let's see, people will probably sign up. And yes, every time there's something like this, guests sign up. We change our itinerary, not the itinerary, we can't change the itineraries, but we change the navigational path that we would have taken to go from A to B in order to come close to these things, because this is what ultimately makes Galapagos so special. So we want to show it to you. This is the unscheduled amazing things. The same thing, dolphins or whales coming up. We lower the zodiacs if it's something that we can do at that moment, and we show you these up close. And then the last thing is, as I mentioned, there's also hotels. Remember, there's hotels that are expedition hotels or just the regular hotels. Expedition hotels, there's very, very few. There are only 12 yachts that are allowed to do day tours in the Galapagos Islands. We own one of them. We own the larger one. It has a capacity of 20 guests. We have 2 or 3 guides on that vessel. That's not on live on board. You stay in this hotel and then you move on. This is a hotel that is just a couple of steps away from a beach. It's called the German Beach. It's a beautiful beach. You can go out there snorkeling, you can go out there kayaking, or you can go on the hike behind the hotel. They go birding, right? or we arrange a downhill biking on the upper part of the island, Santa Cruz Island. See a little sign back there? I love it because it's tortoise crossing on these dirt trails of Galapagos. So that's another experience. And this is what the rooms look like. So it's a very comfortable hotel. These are the new ones. Here too, just like the ships, we believe that if this is going to be your home, the least we could do is make it a comfortable, a very nice place. You come in here, you feel comfortable, and the food is extraordinary. This is the yacht, the Sea Lion, and she also went through refurbishing. We keep changing it, freshening it up. Times are changing, some colors are becoming trendy. So yes, this is the area where on the way to the island, you can be there reading a book, then we collapse the tables, and then we can provide a buffet and a lunch there. We have a chef on board, and it's also all run by an expedition leader on the Finch Bay Hotel. I stretched my time a little bit more than the hour, I believe. I started a bit earlier, but this is the time. Marco, I don't know if you've seen some questions that we could answer at this point.
Yes, thank you, Klaus. We do have some questions. Here will be the first one. Do the ships with 10 passengers also have free guides? Also, do your ships have a start rating, more luxurious versus more basic?
Okay, so the first question, if 10 passenger boats have 3 guides, no. No, there's 51 boats in Galapagos that are single guided vessels. A long time ago, when IATA had this idea that every 15 flight tickets, you get a free ticket. That was a long time ago. So the 16th ticket on a single code would be for free. So they called that the tour leaders ticket, and Galapagos read that differently and said, all right, so that's a group. 16 passengers is a group. That's where the 16 magical number came from. That was a long time ago. I was still a guide in Galapagos. So the smallest vessels are 10 passengers because they're smaller than they could be, but their permit is up to 16, and they take 1 guide. There hasn't been until now the permit for taking passenger number 17, so that's not going to happen ever. It hasn't happened as far as I know. And for a ship, you don't have the facilities for a second bed for another guide in most of the boats. Some of them, they may be able to put a second one. But that's very, very rare, to be perfectly honest. 3 guides on a 10-passenger boat, I've never heard of that happening in the Galapagos. Then you have only 10 ships in the Galapagos from the 69 ships that have license to operate within Galapagos Islands. Only 10 of them are 3 guides or up and up. And again, we don't want to go back to less than 3 guides for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. That was the first question. Marco, I didn't hear well the second one.
Yeah, well, I will go over another one.
Okay.
What they want to know is how family friendly are these yachts, and what special activities are done for kids?
Oh, that's a great question. Back when I was a guide, the company did family departures. This departure is a family departure. What happened if you couldn't go that week? So you came the next week when it wasn't family friendly. So well, it didn't last long before we realized that we should be family friendly year round. We get guests from Brazil, Argentina, and we get guests from USA, Canada, Australia. So vacations work very different, and we may have families any time of the year. So we are able to do family friendly activities with 1 child onwards. We don't need 2 to start, or 3 or 4 or 6. So what do we do? Well, for one thing, we have a child-friendly menu, for instance. I mentioned that. We could do this earlier than the dinner timing if the child needs, it can't wait until 7:30 at evening. We'll do it earlier, right? And sometimes the parents sign up and they also have this child-friendly food, which is not junk food. We saw a burger there. The burgers that make there spectacular, but it's child-friendly and less courses, right? And then we have activities on board. And the activities that are most popular are, for instance, the cooking lessons for children, or going to the bridge, or having knots, nautical knots with the crew, or teaching them to operate a Zodiac, so these sort of things. We don't have a kids club because, of course, 48 passengers, that's too small for a kids club like some of those Caribbean cruise ships. But yes, that's what we do.
We will answer two more questions, and the other ones that were not answered, we will send you in our follow-up. But the next one will be, how can you compare the stability of a 20 people yacht versus a 48 yacht?
Well, it's a very simple mathematical thing, right? A boat is basically like a bridge, and how many columns are supporting the bridge. If each column, you should understand, is the peak of one wave to the peak of the next wave. So if you're going with the Isabela II across the Shake passage, you would see that that's probably not an ideal size. But we don't have Drake passage conditions in Galapagos because we're on the equator, we're in the doldrums for about half the year, and then for another half of the year we have the trade winds, the southern trade winds that normally don't come up to the equator, and then you can have white caps at sea. Now, the longer you are, the less problem you would have handling waves. It's almost self-explanatory, right? So our ships are ideal. Now, I should also say that the fact that we're on the equator, you see that even the new vessels that were built for Galapagos by Silversea and Celebrity, they don't have stabilizers because stabilizers are very expensive, and because the seas of a ship that size, fine. If you're in a 16-passenger boat, hopefully it has a stabilizer, because you will feel a lot more, especially the rolling part that is an issue. Yes.
Great. Why should I choose your cruise over other well-known brands like Ajax, Limland, Celebrity, and Silverseas? What sets you apart?
Which one was it? Ajax?
Yes.
Ajax. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So why? Well, first thing, everybody who operates in Galapagos is complying with 100,000 rules. It's one of the most regulated places on earth. So everybody who's there is doing a great job. Nobody is doing a bad job. Nobody is causing the extinction of the tortoises or the hammerheads in Galapagos, right? That's the first thing you need to know. There's no bad actors and good actors there. I would say if you go to Galapagos because Galapagos in wildlife is what interests you, then definitely go on an expedition yacht and make sure that expedition yacht, as we talked before, has at least 3 guides on board, right? If you're not going on a ship expedition, hotel at least, not just a regular hotel. Regular hotel, great for an extension of a ship. That is fantastic. That's a great thing to do. A lot of people appreciate having an extra time in Galapagos. Then, if your expedition leader is ranked so high as in our vessels or in Lindblad, for instance, then you know it's an expedition boat. The others are more recreational cruises, and the high cost you're paying is probably for items that are not so much related to your expedition experience. In our cases, is that we sail longer at night. We have all the gadgets we need in order to show you extra things on board, like the microscopes and the bone clones, right? To show you, explain you better why a seal and a sea lion are different families and what makes them so different. All of these things. I would say that probably the most similar ones are Lindblad and us. And we started both right at the beginning of the national park. We were the oldest companies, the 2 oldest companies in Galapagos, and we've been doing expeditions ever since we started. And the most important person on their ship and our ship is the expedition leader. So that would be probably similar. We only operate Galapagos, Peru, and Colombia, of course. Lindblad is also in the Arctic, Antarctic, and so on. They're based in Manhattan. We're based in Puerto Ayora, Galapagos. That might be one of the reasons why we don't cost as much as Lindblad. But other than that, we even have a ship that's exactly similar to their Endeavour 2. I don't know if that answered that question, Marco.
Great. And the last is a big boat like La Pinta normally the only one on an island, or are there several boats in the same island?
Excellent question. That's a great question. There is something since the year 2012 called GAM in Spanish, Grupos al Mismo Momento. There's 183 visiting sites. Half of them are marine, half of them are terrestrial. And what the national park changed in 2012 is that they wouldn't count how many ships are in one visiting site, but how many groups should be allowed on any visiting site. So they made a long study to see how tourism is impacting the Galapagos wildlife. First, I should say that one of the most refreshing things is that they couldn't see negative impact. They studied the hormones of stress. They looked at the fat content in the sea lion's milk. Everything that could be an indication that the presence of people on the long run would affect somehow negatively the species. None of this was found, which was great news. But then they also established that each visiting site would have to have a number of groups that could be there at any given moment. Now, the best sites are GAM6, because you would have 6 groups. So a ship like Santa Cruz 2 is GAM6, 90 passengers divided by 16, 5 point something, so Santa Cruz would be alone there. With La Pinta and Isabela II, they're GAM3. That means that on these places, we may have 1, 2, and in 2 or 3 places, we have 3 small boats there. But it's different than having 6 small boats. When you're going on a single guided vessel, that means that there's 6 small boats, nobody coordinates. All of them would probably say it's a good idea to go on shore at 8 in the morning, and all of them would start queuing up in some critical points, producing these bottleneck situations. So that's definitely not the case with La Pinta, and that's definitely not the case with Isabela II. It's not completely alone. We have a list of the places where we see another boats, and even there, the way the expedition leader organizes trips is that those who want to do snorkeling maybe want to go in the first groups. So you get to see everything without feeling you're rushing. And then you come back on board before everybody else. And then you go out snorkeling because you're the first one on the snorkeling side. You can also be the last one snorkeling. So you've seen everything, you've heard everything, and you had more time to snorkel with the sea lions, the turtles, and the penguins, right? But if one person is a non-snorkeler, why do I have to go at a fast pace? So go on the next groups, and then you have the whole morning to enjoy the trail. If you're not snorkeling, why do I have to rush you back and take you out of the wildlife colony? Walk at a much more relaxed pace, and then come back on board, and you've basically made everyone happy with that. That was a great question.
Thank you, Klaus. I think that we have answered almost all the questions, not all, we will. Thank you all for joining us. We will send you the presentation, also the recording of our webinar, and the winner of our prize. So thank you all. Remember that we are here for you. You have an entire team just dedicated to our travel advisors. So we can jump into a call whenever you like. Thank you all, and see you soon with everyone.
Thank you, Marco. And thank you, everyone. And some familiar faces, names I saw there. Great to see you there. And I hope to see you sometime soon in person. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.